Welcome to the party, pal. This is Fountainhead Forum 24. I have Roslyn Ross, who is a married mother of three. She's also an American expat living in Nicaragua, and she's going to talk about life in Nicaragua and raising kids in Nicaragua and, of course, homeschooling and all this other nice stuff. How are you doing, Roslyn?
I am doing great. How are you,
Yes.
Chris?
I'm fine. Yeah. You got into Ayn Rand. Can you tell me how you got into Ayn Rand?
When I was in high school, a boy. No! It's better than that. When I was in high school, when I was 15, I went to visit my grandfather, and I was having lunch with him at a country club with his best friend, who at the time his best friends were Cheryl Ladd and Brian Russell. I didn't know who they were, but it was important to him, and we were having lunch at the country club, and I was just this dumb 15-year-old, and they were like, well, Roslyn, what do you want to do with your life? And I was like, oh, I just want to help poor people. And Cheryl was eating her steak. She was like cutting it up, and she was like she turned to my grandfather and she goes, good God, Bill, get this girl. Atlas shrugged, just keeps eating. And my grandfather took me to a bookstore that day and bought me Atlas Shrugged. And then it sat on my bookshelf I went to boarding school. It sat on my bookshelf for all 4 years of high school. I never read it. It was too big. I was like, oh, it's too big. And then my senior year, this kid kept coming by my room being like, you need to read that book. You haven't read it yet? Oh, you need to read that book. And I was like, I'm going to get to it. I'm going to get to it. And then that's what I did. The summer after graduation I read Atlas Shrugged. I read it in 2 weeks. It was the most mind-blowing, exciting thing I'd ever read. And then I became a big fan.
Cheryl Ladd's a fan of Atlas Shrugged?
Oh, yeah. Huge fan.
Cheryl Ladd as in Charlie's Angels, Cheryl Ladd. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, my. And
she's the reason I read it. If that moment hadn't have happened, I would never have owned it.
This might be one of the best introduction to Ayn Rand stories I've heard. I've never heard anybody talk about her being a fan of Atlas Shrugged.
She probably wouldn't have a career in Hollywood if people knew. So let's keep it on the down low.
Yeah,
maybe she would be mad if I told people
that. Yeah, she's actually and she's gotten old, but she still looks pretty damn good.
Yeah.
I really admire her. She's and everybody likes her. I know she's a very also, she's very popular on the celebrity golf tour. I mean, she gets invited to all these pro-ams and stuff, and of course,
I imagine
you can blame them. Men who have at one point or another saw Charlie's Angels, certainly.
Well, I've seen her. She's at all of my grandfather's birthday parties. And so I've seen her at parties, and she's incredible. Her and her husband sing. So at some point during the party, they sit down at the piano and they do this duet, and they're mind-blowing. They're such good performers, and they're incredible. I mean, they're just good at parties.
Yeah.
So if I were having a party, I would invite her.
Do you still have your grandfather around, or?
No, he died last year.
Okay, yeah, that's
by choice. By choice, he went out. He was 93, and he was done.
Yeah.
I consider that a huge mark of pride. Both of my grandfathers left by choice.
Also be happy that you had your grandfathers as long as you did. It's you really, because a lot of us, mine were both gone when I was 6. But anyway, yeah. But that's so wild. Who would Cheryl be? Well, she's gotten older now, but she would have been amazing as Kira.
Oh, yeah. Or Dagny. She could have been any of them. She would have been amazing.
I think Kira probably would have been the best role, but yes, she do. Yeah. I'm surprised I've never heard that one. That's a new one for me. Even I will have to look into that more. And, this actually also, you just gave me an idea. I am not shy about going on Twitter or whatever and saying, hey, come on my podcast. So guess what? I now have a project. Get Cheryl Ladd for this podcast. So I appreciate that. I would love it.
I hope I didn't get her in trouble.
Oh, I was 7 or 8 years old. I was a big fan of the Angels. It was cute just watching, hey, we got beautiful women, but they also kick ass, and they were smart and doing a man's job. Were you a fan of Charlie's Angels, or?
I have never seen the Charlie's Angels with Cheryl Ladd. I saw that one movie with Cameron Diaz and Drew Barrymore and Lucy Liu when I was in high school or college, but otherwise I know nothing about it.
I've never watched the movies. When I heard they weren't going to have guns in the movies, I just said it just doesn't seem like it's respectful of what the series stood for at all. It's obviously they, it's something you can do. You have a lot of flexibility with that series, but and it certainly would have lasted longer if they had not they'd not had all the changes. They did quite well to hire Cheryl when Farrah left. I think that was pretty seamless. But then when Kate left, it didn't. Kate was kind of the glue that held things together, and I don't think they really recovered. There really wasn't replacing Kate, unfortunately. It's Kate Jackson, but yeah. So that's. But anyway, so yeah. So that was how you got an Ayn Rand, and then you went to. I know you've spoken at Giant Bandari's Capitalism and Morality Conference. What'd you speak about there? What are the issues that become passionate to you now?
Well, what I was interested in was where objectivism intersected with parenting. That was my main interest. That's what I talked about there.
Yeah, I as even when I read Rand, I always wondered and noticed that, and a lot of people who like Rand are always critical of that one aspect, is that there's no real talk about the family here. And I mean, and the childless couple and objectivism has kind of become a cliche. It's kind of sad, really, because what do you do when you get old? You have people who you don't have people taking care of you, having to deal with, a grandparent or whatever, just seeing people who end up handling all your affairs. Who's going to handle your affairs?
Well, don't be that old person. I advocate going out when you can still go out by choice. I don't think you should hang on to life, and become dementified and don't know who you are for the last 10 years and live in a home and have someone change your diapers. I think that's an embarrassing. Someone said, when I was studying history, someone said, make your death a gift. Is there a way to make your death a gift? It'd be cool to die for a cause as you got older. I guess older people aren't really very capable. They just become more and more afraid of death. And I expect that'll happen to me too.
Yeah. But you have things like, okay, well, who's going to take care of my dogs? That was something when my brother.
Stop getting dogs.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
The Swedish art of death cleaning.
Or taking care of your stuff, like I want to make sure that this.
No, you should take. So it used to be considered rude to die and leave unfinished business. In the Middle Ages, when you thought you were getting close to death, you would just give away all your stuff and go join a convent, so that your death wasn't going to be cumbersome to your heirs. And there's a book called the Swedish Art of Death Cleaning or something like that. I haven't read it yet, but I plan to. And as someone who has seen many grandparents leave behind storage units and houses just filled with stuff, and the kids spend months going through it all, it's rude. Don't do that.
That's definitely something there. So how have you reconciled objectivism with family? Because you're a mother of 3 kids and you're happily married. I mean, and that's another thing in itself, though. You also look at some of the musical marriages that happen in objectivism. It doesn't happen with all of them, but it certainly happens with a lot of them. So how have you reconciled that, or what have you done with your life since then? Or
well, I think it just comes down to the primary goal, the primary thing that you want. And unfortunately, the primary goal in objectivism is often self-realization. And I'm not really a member. I don't really subscribe to that. My primary goal is to do a really good job raising my kids. And part of doing a really good job raising your kids is staying married to their dad, because the outcomes for children that come from, non-broken families are so much better than the outcomes for children that come from divorce. Not to mention that if you want your kid to be abused or mistreated, the number one thing you can do is introduce a step parent into the family. So it's just a terrible decision for your children all the way around. So if what matters to you the most is your own self-realization, then you shouldn't get married in the first place or have children, because human relationships have a shelf life of about 7 years. After about 7 years, you've learned everything you're ever going to learn from the person, and it's most likely time to move on. A lot of people will hang on for another couple of years, maybe 10, or maybe you'll be friends for life, but you're not really making each other grow. You're just kind of friends that catch up every now and then. But if you're in a relationship with another human being to grow, which is what we're attracted to. We're attracted to people that will make us grow, that we have things to learn. We want to, our brains, we love learning. That's what makes us happy. And if you want to learn and be happy, then you want a constant string of new relationships. But if what you want is to do a good job raising children, then you actually want stability.
Yeah. That's a good point, though. It's how I often say that life sends us teachers, and most of our teachers are not meant to be there for our entire lives.
Yeah.
I can still remember when I just made this conscious decision that I wasn't going to watch Sesame Street anymore. And I just thought, this isn't for me anymore. And I didn't go through this ugly breakup. I just said, okay, I'm not going to watch Sesame Street anymore. And I just changed the channel on the TV and went somewhere else. It seems as though but what most parents will say also is that, look at all these things I learned from my kids.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Or in some cases, I think maybe they relearn things that they forgot.
Yeah. I think the main thing, though, is, oh my gosh. So my oldest son has my personality, like, to a T. Like, he's just the male version of me so far. And it is absolutely mind-blowing what a difficult person I am. I had no idea how hard I was to get along with until I have this kid who's just, we call me autistic in my household. Oh, that's your mom. She's just being autistic right now. That's him. And it's funny and shocking. And it makes me want to be a better person, a nicer, more considerate person.
Yeah. Your kids are how old? You have
my oldest is 11, and then I have a 3-year-old and a 10-month-old.
Okay. So you had a 3-year-old. So yeah. So you've been married for what?
We've been together for since 2006. Since 2006.
Yeah. How'd you two get together in the first place?
We were both watching The Same Street Musician on Hollywood and Highland, and my friend thought he was cute, and so she said, "Go talk to that guy so that I can talk to him." And I said, "Okay." And so I went up to the guy who I later married, and I was like, I started a conversation about The Street Musician, and then my friend came up, and he didn't like my friend very much, but he liked me a lot, and so we became friends, and then a year later we became lovers.
Did she hate you, or is she still your friend?
No, we're still good friends. No, she's so happy too. It's so funny too. I didn't see it coming at all because he just wasn't my type. He was her type. And so when he didn't like her, I actually kept being friends with him because I thought he was perfect for my other friend. And so I was screening him. I hung out with him once to screen him for my friend Katie, whose type, he was also her type. And then for our second date, I invited him and Katie over to my house to make, it was Christmas time, so we were going to make gingerbread cookies. And then he hated Katie too, and she hated him too. So I guess he was like physically their type, but his personality was my type. So
so you were friends for a while before. Yeah, interesting. Yeah. That's a good story. Do you think you have to be friends first? I mean, there seems to be a lot of debate on that. I mean,
I think it really depends on the person. I had girlfriends in college that, were really serious about dating, and there had to be physical contact right away so that they would know.
Yeah.
And I was the absolute opposite. I was not interested in, I wouldn't become physically interested in someone for a long time until I knew them really well, and really connected with them on an intellectual level. And then I would start to become interested in, but the third date rule really messed with me in college because I was never ready to kiss anyone by the third date.
Yeah. I don't think, I think one problem is I think a lot of men have female friends, but they're not really their female friends. And one thing I find interesting is that you were this guy's friend.
Yeah.
And you immediately though started to promote him. You wanted to promote him like, hey,
I thought he was great.
And but there are women out there who, I mean, there are women out there who have guy friends, but they will do nothing to promote the guy. I mean, and to me, that's the ultimate test of whether or not a woman really is your friend. Is your woman?
Oh no, I'm a matchmaker for everyone.
Yeah,
whenever I've come across a single person, I immediately start thinking of like all the single people I know. I want to match them up. It's like my favorite thing. I love romance and getting people together and helping them find partners. I don't know. That's just one of my things.
Maybe you could turn that into, you could monetize that some way. You might be good at that. Yeah.
Oh my God. Being a matchmaker. Yes. I would love that. But there's too many things I would love. I would also love to be an event planner. And in the meantime, I got kids to raise and books to write. So
I often find myself sometimes especially with some ladies I know, I'll just connect them up and say, like I know one woman in Mexico who likes to do aerial acrobatics. And then I talked to another lady recently who likes to do aerial acrobatics. And I went on Facebook and said, hey, I should introduce you two. You both like to fly in the sky. It's like, so figured. I've
offended people before though. Like I invited recently, like a year ago, I invited a girlfriend of mine and a guy friend of mine to a movie with me because I wanted them to meet because I thought that.
Oh yeah.
So my girlfriend, not the guy was super happy. The girl was like, how could you even think that I would like that guy? He's so, I'm here intellectually and he's here. And she was super offended and I felt bad.
Maybe more people do that because they've had one experience where they got it wrong and they're just afraid to try again. I think that is a really, wonderful thing. It's funny when we're, talking about It's a Wonderful Life, and it's how George's mother ends up saying, George, you really should go for that Mary girl. And she.
No, we need encouragement.
Mom ends up. And of course, I bet mom is often more right about that than most men or women would like to admit,
Yes. We need the old ladies in society constantly pressuring people to pair up and get married. We need them.
Well, older women, they definitely have a way of reading people that definitely, I mean, I think they've just learned that much and I
think they know. I think young people don't know. Like I didn't know I grew up hearing not to get married and not to have kids and that it was a stupid thing to do or I was too smart for that. Like I needed to do something better with my life than get married and have kids. That was the message that I got. And so I grew up thinking that I was never going to get married or have kids. And then, I fall in love and then I have a kid and then I'm like, oh my God, this is all I ever wanted. This is the best thing in the world. I don't care about my career. Like all I care about is my babies. And I think that if I had never had that child, I wouldn't have known that. I would have thought that career was all that mattered to me. And I think I think it's true for, at least a lot of my girlfriends. And old women know that. They know that you just need to get married and have a baby, and then you'll understand. But until you do that, you look at parents and you're like, oh God, that looks awful. I don't want to do that. But I think older people, they know.
What was your upbringing like? When and where were you hearing that? I mean, who was telling you that?
Oh God. I was raised by like crazy hippies, like communist hippies. My father renounced money when he was a young man and moved to the hills with my mom, and I lived on a farm and grew up in poverty, and that was fun. And my parents, when I was 13, they sat me down and they were like, you're 13, so you're probably going to want to have sex. You should do that. It'd help you loosen up. And what you need to know about relationships is that boys are for fun, and if they're not fun, dump them. Like no consideration for their feelings. No. When I was 6, I wanted to be a bride for Halloween, and my parents forbade it. They said, no, you will do something better with your life. You're very bright. You should not. You have to do something better than get married and have children. So I was a butterfly instead. Still resent it. And
what kind of marriage? What kind of relationship did your parents have?
They are divorced. My mom left my dad when I was 13, but she regretted it, interestingly enough. She left him for another man, and about 3 years later, she told me that love was like a drug, and she was a drug addict, and that it's never as good the second, just like any drug. She's like, falling in love is never as good the second time. And what you realize is that falling in love is a drug, and it lasts 1 to 3 years. And after that, what you have is a best friend. And you can either commit to that best friend and be content with it, or you can keep chasing that high, that drug high, which is what you see Hollywood encouraging. You know, if you're not madly in love, then clearly you shouldn't be in a relationship. But the drug is designed to get you to pair bond. It's not designed to last forever. It would be too exhausting on your brain. It would be the wear and tear of being constantly high like that. You know, that would not be good for you health-wise. So yeah. So she leaves my dad for this other guy, and after the love chemicals with the other guy wear off, she realizes that my dad was her best friend. And if she had just known that she should be content with that, she never would have left him. So that was a really good lesson for me when I was a teenager.
Yeah. So you came from you actually got healthy from a situation that wasn't healthy, which is, you know, you hear about it going the other way a lot, unfortunately. Where
you mean becoming less healthy?
Yeah, where because I was talking about Jordan Peterson and his wife, and now their daughter's already had divorced her father of her first kid, now gotten married to a second kid. I almost think to a certain extent that Ayn Rand seems to encourage that kind of behavior.
Oh yeah. Well, yes, she was an objectivist. She never had kids. She didn't know.
Yeah, but also
nothing. Yeah.
But also this, what some people call it, this constant cycle of trading up, or always looking.
Mm-hmm. It's hard not to do that. Yep.
Other men, I know in some red pill communities, they'll talk about what they call the alpha widow. Basically an example is, maybe a girl is 18 or not, a woman's 18 or 19. She happens to go to this concert and has, and goes backstage and has sex with the big rock star that hundreds of women in this audience want to have sex with, and she got to be the one. And and after that experience, she'll still compare all of her future lovers to that guy.
Oh, yeah.
The dopamine rush that she got from, going, with
who writes about that? Is it Jordan Peterson that talks about that? Someone talks about that phenomenon and how bad it is.
Rollo Tomasi talks about it a lot. Jordan Peterson's clueless. I don't think he talks about it at all.
Yeah. I know I've read about that before.
Yeah. But that's, I mean, Jordan Peterson just says, men should, ignore stuff like that and go marry that girl anyway, even though the girl is still going to be pining for the alpha, for the alpha widow, or she might have been, boyfriends with the quarterback back in her senior year of high school, or went to the prom with him, and my current boyfriend just doesn't compare to him. That's why my current husband doesn't compare to him.
No, that's why I read a book once that argued that that's why women shouldn't sleep with men. That's why you don't want to know what level of man will sleep with you. You want to know what level of man will commit to you. And if you start sleeping with every guy, you're going to have an artificial sense of what kind of guy is going to commit to you. And it'll mess you up. Yeah, I read that somewhere.
Yeah.
Really good advice.
Yeah. Yeah, it's because it is a different thing, and I definitely see things happening here. We don't live in a healthy society right now. But yeah, because I do think there are things out there that really mess things up. There's a certain spirituality with all this that I don't think we appreciate. Maybe it's and I didn't really get it until I did psychedelics. I don't know if kids appreciate all those things. That just curious. What have you told your, if you don't mind me asking, what have you told your 11-year-old son so far, or what have your
about what?
About girls and things like that. It's
whatever he wants to know.
He's probably asking questions.
I tell my son absolutely everything, and I always have since he was young. So whatever he wants to know. He lives on a farm, so he's been clear about sex since he was, 2. Like, what are the chickens doing? Oh, they're having sex. What are the dogs doing? Oh, they're having sex. They're making babies. So he's been clear on that for a long time. When he turned 11, I said, "Oh, honey, you're 11. That means there's a good chance you'll be getting more testosterone this year. So you might notice yourself feeling angrier or more emotional than usual. And it's just going to get worse for the next couple of years till you get used to a man's level of testosterone. And you have to learn how to deal with it. So if you notice yourself feeling angry or emotional, it's really important that, the best thing to do is to go for a run or to cry. Those are the 2 best ways to get rid of excess hormones in your body. And I guarantee you're going to prefer the running to the crying. So it's time to have that automatic response. When you feel angry, go for a run. When you feel emotional, go for a run. So he knows that at some, are you attracted to girls yet? And he's like, eh. And I'm like, all right, well, I mean, I can tell, but they're attracted to him. I tell you that. Those little girls who are 11, they're already on it. Like they are boy crazy. And he told me recently his best friend has started to become girl crazy. And I'm like, yeah, that's what happens. It's going to become the most interesting thing to you in the world. And what you need to just keep focusing on is making yourself into the most ideal man that you can, because the better you make yourself, the better the girl you'll be able to attract. So stay focused on yourself right now.
Yeah, a lot. That's something I'll say, chase excellence, not women.
Chase what?
Chase excellence, not women.
Yes. Chase excellence, not women. And then women will chase you.
Yeah, there's definitely definitely. So it sounds that, I'm curious. Well, your other kids aren't older enough, but it's.
And then I warned him too about the other things. Like I have, I made friends with a sex therapist like 10 years ago, and she was really funny. She was 73 when we were hanging out. She'd been a sex therapist for 40 years. She told me, and this was shocking to me at the time. This was 10 years ago. So my son was a baby, and I had, I thought what the media had taught me, which was that porn is fun. It's just fun. And it's all, everybody watches it and it's just fun. And she's like, oh God, no. Like, she's like, that's what I learned in school. But after 40 years as a sex therapist, let me tell you something. Porn is one of the most horrible things you can ever do to your brain. Never, ever watch porn. She's like, almost all of my clients are men whose penises don't work because of porn. She's like, the way your brain works, what you orgasm to is what you will crave. And whatever you're orgasming to, what you're watching on that screen, that's what you will crave. And you will cease to be functional in the real world, because porn is not like real life. And so she gave me that lecture, and that was great. So I do encourage my son to try to not engage in porn. 25% of the boys in his generation will have erectile dysfunction by the time they're 25 due to excess porn consumption. And he doesn't want to be part of that 25%. That's a big number.
Yeah. I'm old enough, the first time, that we ever saw dirty pictures was in a magazine. And now
those are not as damaging.
It's not. Yeah. It's not.
That's not the level. Yeah. I didn't even know.
It wasn't as easy to get, though. I mean,
yeah.
I can remember I can remember one of my distant cousins actually, got in trouble because he was trying to steal magazines from a store. He was like 12 or 13, but, obviously because he couldn't buy them. It's like,
I was raised. So in the generation I was in, porn, you had to get tapes or DVDs. You had to acquire that physical tape and play it. It was before the easy porn on the internet generation.
Yeah.
And I have all these friends now that I chat with who are in their 20s. And what's been shocking to me is that so many of them as teenagers had porn addictions and were destroyed sexually. By the time they were like 18 or 19, they couldn't have a healthy sexual relationship because of their porn watching. So the generation that is currently finally dealing with that, and they quit watching porn together, and they try to pair up at, they're about to turn 30, that generation. I didn't know how messed up they were. And I didn't know anyone who was addicted to porn. Like, that wasn't part of my generation. But hearing firsthand stories has also opened my eyes.
Yeah. It's, Does your 11-year-old have his own phone, or what's how wired is he, or does he just have a computer? Or
He has a computer, but he is never allowed to use it in alone. So this is actually a rule that I got from these people. So I meet all these people from my blog. In order to my blog is private, and in order to get an invitation to read my blog, you have to introduce yourself to me, so that you can't be a troll. Basically, if you know enough about me to troll me, I have to know enough about you to troll you back. So in order to get an invitation, I acquire information about you. So I've made all these friends with all these people who read my blog. And what I learned from the porn addicts, from the recovering porn addicts, is that their strategy is your computer should be in a room where everyone can see the screen at all times, and you don't leave a teenager alone with the internet, unfortunately. So that is the rule for my son, and he's not, he makes sure that somebody's watching him when he's on screen. And
yeah,
so far it's a non-issue, but he's also 11, so we'll see.
And of course, you're also there because you're being a full-time mom, and you're there to at least make sure, because I don't know how we ever. I realize that there, I don't know whatever made us think that we could contract out parental duties, and yet, and we allegedly call that progress.
It's very efficient. I could argue it. I can see where they're coming from. It turned out to be a mistake, yes, but I can see where they're coming from, where they're like double the workforce. This is a competition, and we want to beat the other countries. And we have all these women. We have all these hardworking, intelligent women. Let's take that for the group rather than have them dedicate that individually. And then they're like, and they think about it like businessmen. They're like, scale, like, why should one woman take care of 3 kids when one woman could take care of 30, and then free up all those other women for being productive and adding to the economy? Like, it makes sense when you think about it like a businessman.
I don't think that was the reason. I think it's because they wanted to change kids, and they knew these parents wouldn't allow.
Oh, there's definitely motives like that. Yeah,
it was about.
Yeah,
but it's definitely created this situation also, because when you have when you have double the people in the labor force, it also means, so 2 people are applying for that job, and now one person was applying for that job. Now 2 people are applying for that job, so you end up with we don't have to pay them as much. I mean, and you have. And it's funny. I know so many women.
Well, and the whole economy changes because now you have all these women who want, service-oriented jobs or people-oriented jobs. They're not geared toward. It's like demographics or destiny, and what the people in the workforce are now driving the workforce in a certain way.
Well, you also end up, with a lot of, women pursuing what I call the poverty degrees. I mean. I have a master's in social work. Well, guess what?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Guess what? I mean, somebody with a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering is getting paid a lot more money than somebody with a master's degree in social work.
Yep.
Or I have a master in library science. And granted, noble work. I'm not.
I have a degree in English.
Yeah. There's nothing, and there's not. I think I don't know exactly how you have it. You what you do with a degree in English, but I think
nothing. You don't do anything. You don't get a degree in English. If your kid wants a liberal arts degree, you say, "Oh, that's great. Maybe you should go get a job," and you do not send them to college. And
I actually do know a lot of people who are doing tech jobs who do have
liberal arts degrees
and things that they have degrees in things that have nothing to do with their field. Like a guy who was doing computer work who had a degree in biology. Stuff like that. I mean,
Okay. That's still STEM though.
Yeah. It seems like to me, just the fact that they have this degree at all is what, but it is kind of interesting how this works out. I mean, I don't know how you can, and of course, obviously, a degree in English. I mean, you can go be a journalist. I mean, that's certainly a route for that. I mean, go be the newspaper, go work on the newspaper, go work for a book publisher. I mean, that's, one area.
I can read well. That's what I can do.
Yeah. Yeah, you read and write well. I mean, I think those are very important skills. I think it's kind of sad that those are, you know, although one thing I've noticed too is that a lot of the so-called English classes were really just reading memory tests, which I never, you know, it's
oh no, I don't think so. I think they're propaganda. Have you seen the book lists? I think English classes are disgusting. I don't send my kids.
I haven't seen the book lists recently, but I can see what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, they're not okay.
Yeah.
I don't think.
Yeah, so that's very interesting. It's you had parents who were hippies.
Yes. Oh, they used to encourage me to do drugs too. They were always told me I was too uptight. Oh, I didn't finish that story. Good job. So my parents told me when I was 13 to go have sex, and you know what I told them, because I was a rebellious 13-year-old?
Yeah, I love this. The rebellious, rebelling against the hippies by being normal. It's just absolutely hilarious.
So you can see where I'm going with the story. Yeah. I was like, I'm not gonna have sex. I'm gonna be a virgin till I'm married. That's how I responded.
God. This is so
isn't it? It's so funny.
You know, what did your parents, when you had a copy of Atlas Shrugged, what did your parents say about that?
So I was at boarding school at that time, so I don't know if they ever saw my copy of Atlas Shrugged. I didn't really see them a lot during those years.
If your parents were poor, how did you end up at a boarding school? I
got a full scholarship because I was smart. I actually had to. Actually, it's a. I had a 4.3 GPA or whatever at my public school, and I was quite bright. I was valedictorian of my junior high, and I did every extracurricular they offered because I was bored out of my mind. And I applied to 16 boarding schools because I wanted a better education. And well, because what happened is I went to visit my grandfather, and my grandfather was very wealthy. And I said, Grandpa, this is what I want. And my grandpa said, oh, education. So I had a single-minded focus on education is your ticket. You want to be rich like me? Education. So I wish he had given me more advice than that. But so I had single-minded focus on education. And when I was applying to the boarding schools, I got 16 schools offered me a full scholarship, and they would call me for my interview. And then at some point in my interview, they would be like, so are you not black? We thought you were black. You have a black name. And I'd be like, oh, no, I'm white. I'm named Roslyn, but I'm white. And they'd be like, oh, sorry, we don't have scholarships for white kids. Bye. So 15 schools did this to me. 15. I lost the scholarship because of my skin color. And at the time, like, I didn't know, like, I believed in, you know, equality and freedom, or I thought it was very wrong. I was a teenager, and I thought that it was wrong what they were doing. And so the 16th school, the last school to offer me a full scholarship, call me on the phone for an interview, when they found out I was white, and they started to be like, oh, I was like, oh, and I started yelling at them. And I yelled at the dean of admissions on the phone, and I told him that this was bullshit, and that white kids needed help too, and that I grew up in poverty, and I was working my butt off, and I didn't I basically yelled at him. I was like, I'm a good investment. I'm going to be rich one day, and whatever school takes me is going to reap the benefits. And he was so impressed by my pluck that he gave me the scholarship, with a bunch of caveats. I had to have the highest GPA in my class to keep the scholarship. So and he was like, and you're not gonna be able to do it. You know, you come from public school. You don't understand how much more difficult private school is. So you can come here. I also had to stay over every vacation and work off as much of my scholarship as I could. I worked in the dining hall on weekends, on Saturday and Sunday, washing dishes for all the rich kids that attended my boarding school, and all of the black kids on their free rides where they didn't have to work for their scholarships. That's how I ended up at boarding school.
Do you want to say what schools these were, or what this school was?
Yeah, I went to Verde Valley School in Sedona, Arizona. I can tell you, yeah, I don't remember Sedona.
All that. What? Sedona. Yeah. I always hear a lot about all these, you know, people going to Sedona to find their spirituality, and
yeah, it's a very spiritual place.
All these hippies and people like that. You're going to find, I find that interesting though too, and it makes me wonder. why we end up with so many messed up rich kids, and
oh, I've been theorizing about that since
I'd love for you to go into this. Why rich kids, and I mean, why rich kids?
That is one of the most
socialists and just become, why so many rich kids just end up becoming completely worthless, but they're dangerous because they have access to money.
Yeah. No. Okay. So first, 6 out of every 7 rich kids will not be able to achieve the level of wealth that their own parents achieved on their own. So just know that 6 out of every 7 headed down. Rich kids at boarding schools are a specific brand of terrible rich kids because they're the neglected rich kids. Like, never send your kids to boarding school. The specific kids, rich kids in, not at boarding school, at least they're being neglected, but they get to see their parents every now and then, the rich kids at boarding schools. And I think, there are plenty of rich parents that are doing a great job, that are quite involved. But I think my main conclusion after working as a nanny for rich people for 10 years and well, kind of a nanny, executive nanny, but, and then just going to boarding school and going to a really wealthy college too, is that most wealthy kids are not raised by their parents. And so it's a bad situation. They're being raised by TV and nannies who don't care at the end of the day. Yeah. And they're often being raised by nannies from another country who really have no idea what the dangers are and really just give you whatever you want. It's not a good situation.
Where'd you end up going to college?
I went to Wesleyan in Connecticut. Okay. Which at the time was a very wealthy school and a very high-end school. I believe it has fallen quite far since.
Yeah, Wesleyan generally, but Wesleyan's a very old school. Yeah, I mean, it's not quite on it's not quite on Ivy League, but it's kind of at one of those levels. This is interesting though.
Well, it was like number 3 in the country or something when I went there, though. It's like number 20 now. I'm pissed.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's very interesting when you look at some of these rich kids. They're not. They don't get that time with mom and dad that it's and I do wonder if it's it's interesting how that happens, and when they do get that time, it may be rather superficial.
And I think it's also that protection from making mistakes. Like, if you have to suffer the consequences of your choices, but if you are a wealthy man and your kids made some bad choices and you have this social group that you don't want to be embarrassed in, you'll often shelter your kids from the consequences of their choices. Yeah. So part of raising good kids is really standing back and being like, oh, he made a bad choice. Let's all watch. And, your kid has to suffer consequences or he won't learn.
Well, isn't the classic example of all this Chappaquiddick?
I don't know the reference.
I mean, Ted Kennedy killed a woman. He drove a car.
Oh yeah, I did hear about that.
And didn't do anything. I mean, if he's not if he's any standard person off the street and does that, he's going to jail for a long time. But because he's Ted Kennedy, what happens instead? All these people in Massachusetts go out and elect him to the Senate 9 times.
Yeah,
it's. You're part of what Jefferson referred to as the natural aristocracy, the aristocracy of talent and virtue. And I remember that was one thing he always wanted to help nurture people like you, because you had but you did have the grandfather who certainly the corrupting grandfather who subverts what mom and dad do. Because it sounds like that grandfather, was he your mother's father?
My father's father. My father was actually a little rich kid. I didn't realize this until fairly recently, but he was raised in pretty substantial wealth. Like, he dressed for dinner. He would wear a suit and tie to dinner each night at his family's dinner table, and he was raised in wealth. And and his brothers went to boarding school. I don't remember why he didn't go, but and my grandfather went to boarding school when he was 6. And I come from a long line of boarding school family. And my dad thought rich people were disgusting and bad, and only poor people were good people. And he read a lot of Russian literature, and this was the conclusion that he came to. And so he renounced money and decided to raise his kids in poverty. So
Yeah, you know, there's something else too, though. I think it's also because a lot of rich kids end up with what one guy calls snowplow parenting.
Yes.
Everything is made, you know, instead of, and I was talking to my previous guest and I said, you know, kids need to have difficulty. They actually look for difficulty. They look for obstacle courses and they want to navigate them and overcome them. And you have these kids who never do that and they end up not really feeling good about themselves.
Yeah.
And they don't, because they never had that chance to, you know, my grandfather walking to school 2 miles each way.
Yeah.
You know, and
never
you know,
do for a child what the child can do for himself.
You know, I often hear stories, you know, about how, you know, the grocery store in South Central Texas will, you know, they still want their kids to go work in even though they're obviously pretty well off, they still want their kids to go work in the grocery store.
Absolutely.
And that's a good experience, but still it's not the same though, because you know you're not going to get fired.
I know. I think about that with my kids all the time. In my childhood and in my young adulthood, there was no safety net. So when I graduated from college, I rent an apartment. I can't afford furniture. So guess what? I don't have furniture. It takes me 2 years to acquire a full set of furniture for my house. I slept on a mattress on the floor, not even a mattress. It was a cushion on the floor until I could afford a mattress. Then I had a mattress on the floor until I could afford the bed. There's this terror in your heart when you don't have a safety net. And it's so different from my friends from college who their parents help them get that apartment. They give them a car. They help set them up with, and it's just a totally different experience too. And this actually was bad. I had to make money. I couldn't get out of college and do an internship. I couldn't accept a minimum wage job while I worked my way up a ladder. In order to pay my bills, I had to make, I think I calculated it out to be $25 an hour immediately. I had to do that now. And the only job that I could really seriously apply for was being a nanny. That's what would actually pay me $25 an hour right now. Yeah. Whereas all my friends were working minimum wage jobs at places that had ladders. And so I kind of resented that as part of the poverty journey. Yeah. Well, but not having parents, not having a safety net makes you work really hard. And my kid's always going to have a safety net. It's really annoying.
Well, there's one other job that some college girls do to make money. I mean, you know, that's which I got to tell you, if you're a smart girl, you can do quite well at that. Cause you know, I mean, if you don't mind, you know, going to a club and taking off your clothes, but that's one, you know, but and trust me, some of them are smart. If they do that, they definitely do well. Cause you know, and some of them are airheads, but you know, I didn't realize nannies got paid that well. That's very interesting.
Most nannies don't.
Yeah.
Most nannies make minimum wage, but I billed myself as a high-end nanny who had a college degree from Wesleyan University, who was going to raise your kids to do, you know, who was going to do a much better job with your kids than the other nannies. So obviously I worked for I immediately worked for the elite who could afford me, which was really fun.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. That's good to know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you work for the nannies, so that's you figured out a way to do that. That was very, very resourceful of you. So so you didn't get married until you were out of college for a while, or
27?
Okay,
28, 27 or 28.
Yeah, yeah, that's good to know.
But I met my husband when I was 24.
Oh yeah, so it sounds like he did well. So yeah, were you the only in your family, or did your parents have other kids?
I had an older brother and a younger sister.
Yeah. And
my brother did fantastically financially. Yeah. He's a computer security dude.
Yeah.
And works for Chase Bank. And my sister, I believe she did okay financially. Not great, but not in poverty.
You know, do you think there's any way to be wealthy and raise kids that aren't completely messed up?
Oh God, I'm trying to figure that out. So
yeah, I think maybe having them do, maybe having a farm and having them do farm work might help, but.
So, okay, that is such a great question. That was discussed in one of the women's groups that I'm a member of pretty recently on, because
Yeah.
I have staff here. Our farm in Nicaragua, we have a lot of staff, and that's the fear, is that you cannot raise good children with staff. Um, and that's hard because my husband and I like having staff. But
Yeah.
so I'm always on top of the staff to no, he made the mess, he has to clean it up, like that type of thing. But it's really hard and concerning. It's clearly possible because many wealthy children come out of, 1 out of every 7 are ambitious and hardworking.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's I don't want 1 out of my kids to be ambitious and hardworking.
Yeah. It's just interesting because I don't know how, and I have to admit, I think objectivism also attracts a high proportion of these kinds of kids.
You mean losers or hardworking?
No, kids who may not be rich, but certainly above average.
I think objectivism attracts highly intelligent, hardworking, and highly moral people, actually.
Yeah, well, it's hard to say, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know based on my.
But yeah, I think it's important. Yeah, that's such a good question. Is it possible to raise children in wealth who do not become tools?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm doing my best. I'm trying. I'll let you know.
I mean, having kids work on the farm, some parents, said, I'm glad I got my kids horses because horses teach kids to work, because there's a lot of, you got to shovel things that aren't really fun to shovel, but it's
yeah. No, and there's all those sayings, discipline starts in the body, and
yeah. I think a lot of these lessons are probably have to be learned long before they're even teenagers.
Yeah.
I don't,
Well, I think before you're 5, you need to be taught in, habits that make you a nice person to live with. That's the under 5 curriculum is all about being a nice person with whom to live, which means putting your shoes away and putting your toys away and helping clear the dishes from the table and stuff like that. And I do think it's really hard to teach those things when you have staff and when you're wealthy. It might not be wealth, it might be staff. That's the problem.
Yeah, I can see what you mean about having staff, it's because you realize, I don't know, also just maybe taking your kids to maybe having them volunteer at homeless shelters or something like that. I mean,
yes.
I mean, after,
yeah.
When I went to Peru and I often would say to people who had kids, I said, you should take your kids down to Peru. And I said, why? Because when they get back home, they'll say, Mommy and Daddy, we're rich. Certainly in Nicaragua, you probably see, what poverty looks like as well. I mean, it's definitely not a rich country, but and even the people in America who aren't, that we would call rich are still living a lot more comfortably than people in other parts of the world. Because I mean,
yeah,
but it seems as though and I mean, isn't that what becomes a lot of these so-called? I mean, from what I hear from a lot of these so-called elite colleges, that's most of what goes there. I mean, you are the exception, but most of it's, just a bunch of rich kids who go there and talk about, whatever.
Yeah. One thing I learned after I graduated, or one thing that I thought was strange in college, was that I worked very hard at my classes and my peers worked very hard at developing relationships with the faculty members and with each other. And what I came to learn after I graduated is that is the real value in college. I thought the value was the education, and I thought I needed to write great papers and read every book. I read every page of every book that was assigned, which was not actually what you were supposed to do. And every assignment, do your very best. The actual value of college when you graduate is the relationships you developed with the faculty members there and with your peers. And I didn't get that memo. So I didn't socialize all that much. But the rich kids, they knew that's what the point was. And so, yeah, they're not working as hard in one sense, but you know what? We talked about this in my group, my friends group. So poor kids come home and they have, well, poor kids, their parents are usually a mess. Middle-class kids come home and they have chores, and they're going to help set the table, and they're going to help make dinner, and they're going to vacuum, and they're going to sweep, and they're going to take out the trash. These are their chores. Their chores are about how they can help their family. Rich kids their family has staff. Their parents don't cook and clean, and the children don't either. However, those children, at least the children of the people for whom I worked in my 20s, they also had chores. They had to go to social events. First of all, they had to go to these private schools where their parents were often saying, your job is to make friends with this kid and that kid because we want to have dinner with their family. So go make friends with these kids. So those kids also have chores. They're making friends with the specific people. They're social chores. And they also had chores on the weekend. They often had 2 or 3 social engagements every Saturday and then 2 more on Sunday, where these children had to go and be representatives of their family and be delightful and make their family look good. And this actually reminded me of the aristocracy and ancient kings and things. The peasants look at the kings and all these dinners that they're having, and they're like, all they do is party. What they never understand is that those parties were actually work for the kings. The wealthy people for whom I worked did not enjoy social events. They loathed them. They had to go. It was business. This is where business deals happened. This is where connections happened. And they needed to do that. You've got to be friends with the mayor. If you want to get your project happening quickly, you got to be able to call him on your cell phone and say, you know, my project's being held up by this jerk over at City Hall, or, you know, or whatever. You have to know the people to make things happen faster. It's not even a dishonest thing. It's like, just imagine the difference if we're both restaurateurs, and I'm trying to get my restaurant open and you're trying to get your restaurant open, but you know the mayor. And you can text him on your cell phone and be like, dude, this jerk over here is giving me problems. And the guy is like, oh, you know, he's my son's friend. I'll give him a call. And my restaurant, your restaurant can just happen so much faster than mine. And, you know, when time is money and when you need these things, and there's a lot of money on the line, you need to have these people's numbers in your cell phone. You need to be able to text them and they text you back. You can't, you know, if I want to talk to the mayor, it's going to take me, like, do I get to talk to the mayor? Do I ever get to? Like, do I sit in a line outside City Hall? Like, how do I talk to the mayor if I really need to? You know what I mean? So I think that the chore of being wealthy is actually socializing. And I think that wealthy kids, as long as it's phrased to them that way, like, would you rather help cook and clean the house, or would you rather go to these horrific social events? You know, you get to do one or the other, but you're still going to serve your family. You're still going to have these chores, because I realized that later, is that rich people have a lot of chores.
You know, as much as I admire a lot of things as Rand, but where Rand talks about how capitalism is all about productive ability, and I said, I've been out in the real world and no, it's not. Capitalism is about how you play the game. I mean, do you see, for example, that, you know, the person who is the best worker gets promoted? No, the best worker is the person who knows how to schmooze people.
Yes and no. Yeah. For sure. I've seen time and time again, the wrong person get promoted, or because he made friends with the boss. But yeah. I've also seen, I don't know anyone who's intelligent and works hard who hasn't done pretty decently for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's, and you know,
but you do. Yeah, you do. There is a certain amount of,
you know, and what you were saying about, I think one of the most interesting, when I read this study about joining a fraternity, and if you join a fraternity,
I missed that memo too.
Your GPA on average will drop. I think it said your GPA will drop on average 0.25 if you join a fraternity, but the joining a fraternity, the money that you end up making in your real life is what, 30% higher or something like that. And
yep, didn't get that memo.
I wonder how that works. Oh, because your frat boy called up, you know, well, he was part of the frat, you know, and really, as I've said, the biggest frat of all is the military. because military hires military. I mean, if there's a boss,
they find each other trustworthy, probably.
If there's a boss who's got a job opening and there are two guys going for that job, and one guy's military and one guy wasn't military, the military guy's getting the job every time.
So funny. I never thought about that.
It's a, so as much as Rand talked to, I mean, it's really interesting.
Oh, okay. No. So she is correct to a certain extent. My husband is a businessman. He employs like 50 people. He will, if you are excellent at your job and he hates you, he'll still hire you because you're good at your job. And he had people work for him for like, 5 years who he hates, but they were good at their job. So what do? You're a businessman, and that person is making money for your company. So, so there is a certain amount of that going on. And then there's always going to be a certain amount of what you're talking about, which is the corruption, which is how our brains work. Like, you can't even blame people. These things, they do them subconsciously. Or unconsciously, I guess is the new word. They don't even know, like military hiring military. They just know that they feel comfortable with that guy. They don't know why they like him, but they do. My gut says that guy. And so you can't blame them for that. But yeah, there's going to be a certain amount of that.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. So
but also, I don't think you should pretend that we have capitalism right now.
I'm not saying we have capitalism right now. Yeah, we have a lot of crony capitalism and cronyism. I mean, it's all becoming cronyism, but it makes me wonder if it can ever really escape from being cronyism, because you have this.
I don't think so.
I don't know how you end up even see it happen with certain things, like it's very interesting to happen how it happens. I mean,
well, it's the human game. It's the biological game.
Yeah.
As soon as we get together in a group and we agree on the rules, people are walking around the edges trying to figure out how to bend those rules for themselves and their kids. Like, that's just that is and then everybody else trying to figure out how to make you not break the rules, and everybody needs to play by the rules. Like that literally is the dynamic of being a group, a human group. So I don't think that that's ever going to go away. I think it's the story of the Lord of the Rings, the Ring of Power. I think it's the myth, the dream is that we can destroy the Ring of Power once and for all, and then everything will be fair. The reality is the Ring of Power is always there, and you always need good people fighting it. And it's the battle is endless. And if you stop fighting it for a minute, then power becomes evil or corrupt. And I think it just has to be constantly and vigilantly fought.
Yeah, I wonder how you end up working that out, because it seems as though there's always, because there's, you're never going to get rid of rich and poor, but how do you, create a situation where everything, is where there's, first of all, rich people aren't trying to coerce the poor people, and of course, a society where they're not trying to buy favors, because it seems like that it always occurs that way. I don't know how we get this pure capitalism that Rand talked about, and people are diagnosing the problem. But and it's interesting too, with your parents being hippies and getting divorced. It's I wonder, I'm just curious how ideological were even the teenagers at your boarding school? I mean, were they already talking about, we got to smash this or smash that, or were they just didn't care?
I would say they were mostly socialists, kind of like today's teens. I took a class once called the Utopia Project, and we all had to design our utopia. And the teacher split us up into after we had sessions on ideologies, and then my teacher split us up into groups. And basically, there were the commies, the socialists, and then there was me and these 3 other guys who he thought we were different somehow. And we were, I guess you'd call us either the libertarians or the anarchists or whatever. We clearly valued freedom more than the other kids. And so he put us in a group together. But the takeaway was that we were an extreme minority in the class.
Yeah. When you talked about, So.
Oh, and what's interesting about that class too is that I hadn't read Atlas Shrugged yet. I thought I was a socialist at the time, like, because that's how I'd been raised. I'd been raised hardcore, like fundamentalist liberal, like
Mhm.
hardcore liberal. So if you had asked me, I would have said, no, I'm a Democrat. Like I'm a liberal and I believe
Yeah.
in socialism. But as soon as, but this teacher could see that that wasn't really me, and put me in the group with the kids who liked freedom.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I should ask, was this an all girls school or was it co-ed?
No, it was co-ed.
Okay. That was probably very interesting. I suppose there was some, you know, you told your parents you weren't going to have sex, but I can imagine what goes on at boarding schools. That's probably not a lot of people talk about.
I think that we were a lot more innocent than Hollywood wants people to believe. I don't think teenagers are really. I think they're all curious, but I think most of them really aren't ready. But there was definitely a lot of making out.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course it creates.
And there was definitely sex too, but just not as much. It's like when you read the magazines, it's actually like shocking, like compared to what you think, because what you see on TV, you think everyone is having sex, but when you read magazines, it turns out that like there's a lot of people. They're like the majority of people actually aren't. I'm always surprised by that.
Yeah. It's like, it's almost like teenagers, get into this thing. Well, everybody's doing it but me, and no, nobody's doing it. You know.
Well, in a boarding school, everyone is going to know, right?
Yeah.
Everyone is going to know your business. So you better really want to sleep with someone, because everyone's going to know about it. It's not like you get to have an accident and hide it. So
yeah, was it all boarding, or was it like
we had a couple day students, like 10-day students. It was like probably 110 boarders and then 10-day students, and we had kids from all over the world.
Well, there's some prep schools that are some boarding, but also they have a lot of commuter students too. So that's students who live in the area and still live with their parents, but and obviously they don't pay as much, but and then of course they have boarding students who come from all over the world. I mean, I know it's quite uncommon. It's quite common, for example, for rich Mexicans to send their kids to American boarding schools, because I think
we had a rich Mexican at mine.
And partially because, like you said, they want their kids to make these connections, and of course their kids also have to learn English and get immersed in American culture, but they can go back to Mexico and be successful. So
a lot of the rich kids from other countries are just there to learn English and make connections, and understand American culture.
Yeah, understand American culture, for better or for worse. Where do you think is going to happen? Obviously, how long have you been in Nicaragua? You've been in
like 10 years, on and off.
So what made you all pick Nicaragua as opposed to Costa Rica or Mexico? Or
well, at the time, Nicaragua was the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, and we really liked how far our dollar went here, and so we were able to buy. We were able to buy land and build a house for not very much money, to just have this farm and try it out. And when you're young, and neither of my husband or I came from wealth, so we needed our dollars to stretch very far. And we also liked the just how not involved the Nicaraguan government seemed at the time, and we wanted freedom, and we felt very free here.
Yeah. Nicaragua completely rejected all of this Corona nonsense, as far as I know.
Yeah, they didn't care very much.
I mean,
they didn't completely reject it. I mean, there were the rich people stores in the city required masks, and they'd spray your hands before you went in. But yeah, most of the people here, I mean, they couldn't care. How can you care if your only form of transportation is a bus, and you live in poverty, and you hand to mouth, and you have to go to work today or you won't eat? Like what's the plan?
This is the question. And I think a lot of, people are asking, just how did this happen? I mean,
how did what happen?
Why did this happen? This reaction over a pseudo emergency. I mean,
it was PR.
The way that people acted. I mean, I hear a lot of, just summing it up when somebody said, "I will never look at people the same way again after this."
Yeah.
I don't know if, I have to say, for me, that moment really was the World Trade Center. But so people didn't really disappoint me that much in March of 2020. But I remember thinking, I think they're a lot more violent and sadistic than I thought they were.
Yeah. Well, to me, the most interesting thing about COVID, so I've seen COVID coming for a long time. For 20
Yeah.
years, they've been trying to pass coercive vaccine
Yeah.
legislation. Like, California is at the forefront of that. So,
Yeah.
and I always see war as just business for rich people. Like they make investments, right? They put $1 billion into COVID, crap, and they expect to make 10 billion, or whatever, or they expect to make 10 billion 10 years from now after they've passed coercive vaccine legislation. And when I think about vaccines like a businessman, what I think is, there's a huge untapped market for vaccines. Adults, we've got kids maxed out. They're getting as many vaccines as their bodies can really handle, but we could give more vaccines to adults. So what we need to do is make vaccines compulsory, so that if every adult in America had to get the flu shot every year, that's worth however many trillions of dollars. Can we get that? What can we do? What is a PR stunt we can do to make the population agree to pass that legislation or whatever? Because they keep trying to pass the legislation. So now they need a stunt to make people emotionally care who will, in order to have people vote to take away their freedom, you have to make it seem like it's a good idea.
Yes, but
and
yeah, I get that part, but what?
Wait. Let me finish.
What does this say though about the psychology of the citizen of these countries? What does this say about Americans? No.
What does it say about Democrats and Republicans? Because 10 years ago, it was Republicans that were pro-vaccines and Democrats that were against it. And then the media just did this switcheroo. And then like that, it was Republicans that were for freedom of choice, and it was Democrats that were for coerced vaccines. And so now you have all these confused people that are like, wait a minute, I'm a Democrat. I'm for vaccines.
Again, I wasn't confused though. And I'm just asking myself, what does this say about Americans? What does it say? What does this say? It doesn't say anything good.
Most of them aren't thinking about anything very clearly. They just do what the media tells them. They do what the media tells them and think what the media tells them. That's what it's.
I mean, we're doing this show, I don't, if you're not in the loop as what happens to America, there was Monday Night Football was last night, and there was Damar Hamlin. I mean, the guy stood up, and then at one point he's on the football field and he just plain collapsed. He was standing and then he fell down and was on his back, and they did CPR on him. And it's like, and I don't know if this was related to the vaccine or not, but this was so bizarre. I mean, they stopped the game. It didn't start it up again. And everybody left in the middle of the game.
Have you seen the documentary Died Suddenly?
Yeah, I've heard about that one. Yeah. It's so I don't know what it, I mean, it's the same question. What does it say about, what does it say about the Germans that the Holocaust happened? What does it say about the Russians that, that all these things happen under their government? I mean,
well, that's the sins of our fathers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Our father, you have to stand up to the government constantly. Yeah. And if you don't, it's going to come for your kids. So.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and so, and I don't know if gender roles, I mean, what do you think about gender roles right now? I mean, it sounds like to me, Nicaragua is at least very conservative on that too.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one nice thing. It's one of the nice things about Nicaragua. You don't see a lot of skirts that show your butt here or shirts that show your boobs. It's a very conservative place. Not a lot of tattoos, not a lot of funny colored hairs. Most of the middle and upper class girls want to be virgins till they're married. It's a pretty conservative place still. It's nice.
Yeah, it's interesting how are you the only person who is raised by these sexually free hippies who decided, no, I'm rejecting all that out of rebellion? It's I think I've heard of other people like that, who rebel against all this stuff and go the other way, but it's not common. So
Yeah, I don't know. No, I think, oh, yeah. I think there's a lot of people, especially highly intelligent people right now that are like, well, especially any woman who wants her family to work. I mean, there's a quote in the Bible that's like the intelligent woman builds her house and the stupid woman tears her own house down. And I'm obviously not quoting it properly, but
Yeah.
I think, women are the ones who are responsible for most divorces. Women tear their houses down. They
Oh,
destroy their
yes.
for the most part, it's them. And it's I think there's a lot of intelligent women who think very clearly about, okay, well, and it's funny too. This is how the Amish think about things. So I studied the Amish for a while, and a lot of people think that they don't have electricity because because it says so in the Bible. That's not so. They don't have electricity because every time a new technology or a new thing is invented, they sit down and they think, how will this affect the family? Will it help the family or hurt the family? And they looked at electricity and they said, okay, if we accept electricity into our homes, everyone is, instead of sitting around the one oil lamp at the kitchen table every evening together, everyone is going to go to their own separate rooms and do their own separate thing alone with their electricity. So therefore, we reject electricity because it doesn't support the family. For the same reason they reject bicycles, because bicycles separate people and make it hard to converse, but they accept rollerblades. So Amish teens can rollerblade together because that's a communal thing that you can still hang out and do. They reject, soccer, but they accept volleyball. That's a sport that makes us hang out and play together. So they think about everything through the lens of, will this help my family or hurt my family? Will it help our togetherness? And I think a lot of intelligent women, or at least the ones who read my blog, come to this same conclusion where they're like, there's no way the two working parent household is going to create real family togetherness. If you want a real family that's really together and bonded and loving each other and happy to be together, someone is going to have to really be, that's going to be someone's full-time job. And so now I think I'm off subject. Did I answer your question?
That's fascinating about the Amish. I don't really know that many Amish people, but the whole thing about things that will keep, like they don't play soccer, but they play volleyball.
Yeah.
And they don't ride bicycles, but they use rollerblades. I really, that really is, and the thing you said about, sitting down to have dinner, that is something that's kind of a lost art, and I wonder how many times these rich families sit down to have dinner, and I can remember all those times. I can remember, my dad. I can remember all those times, that Dad, would work late and not come home for dinner, and it's like, okay, it's
Well, and happening occasionally, that's not going to be a big deal if it's a normal thing that your family does. But if it's the trend, if it happens every night, then there's something's not working.
I probably overplay it in my memory as to how often it happened, but I just remember how much I hated it when Dad didn't come home. And
your unconscious knew that was bad.
And it got to this point where also when Dad would say he'd come home at a certain time, I would start to interpolate. So, for example, if he said he'd come home at 10, it usually meant that I'd say, well, he's going to come home at 11. Yeah. I mean, literally, that's how I started thinking about that, because and looking back, I realized that's Dad was very, very well respected in his company and very well respected by everybody that he worked with. But it really was something that I wish I would have had more time with Dad. But I think hopefully you realize, because you don't die wishing you'd spent more time at the office.
They say that, yeah.
Yeah, and there's also something.
That's one of my biggest beefs with objectivism. When I was young, I believed that there was a dream job out there for me. And, that's what Disney tells you. There's a dream job, and you should your dream. If somebody says, what's your dream? They mean, what's your dream job? And in my 20s, at some point I was working for a movie star, and she hated her job because her coworker, she was starring in a movie at the time with a guy who was permanently stoned. Her co-star was permanently stoned. And she was miserable going to work every day. And he never knew his lines. And it was always just it. And it was fascinating to me. I realized then that I don't believe in dream jobs. I believe in dream people, because you can have you can shovel horse poop with people that you love, and it's a good time. But you can have the greatest job in the world and do it with people that you can't stand, and it's miserable. So I think there's way too much focus on job and not nearly enough focus on people, because people are what make a life worth living, not jobs. People are what motivate us. So I think Ayn Rand really missed the ball on that one.
I noticed that when I was even in my 20s. I said to somebody, I said, I think it's going to be more important to me the kind of people I work with than the job I'm doing. And
yeah, that's 100% true for me.
And also looking back, also I also can remember just being part of an organization that I was proud to be a part of.
Yeah.
As opposed to being in organizations that I was almost embarrassed to work for.
Yeah. You want to work for a hero. We all want heroes.
Well, also, there was one company I worked for, and I often told people, I said, everybody in that company was just smart. And I remember telling people, this is the smartest company I've ever worked for. It wasn't perfect, but it was this, and I've had some other places where I, just was proud of where I worked. In some places I was almost embarrassed to say that I worked there, just because and I often said, I said, no, we don't have leadership, we have management.
That happens. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's interesting. Where do you, since you don't get back to America all that much, do you?
No, we go back 2 or 3 times a year. Okay. Well, and last year we were there the whole year because I was pregnant with my 10-month-old and we developed this like superstition about flying while I was pregnant. And so I didn't leave.
That's interesting. So fly.
I'm a terrible flyer, and I think I'm going to have a heart attack every time I get on an airplane. I don't know why. I've watched every video about why being afraid of flying is stupid, and I do the thing that you're supposed to do, where you tell yourself that you're excited. I'm not afraid. I'm excited. I'm excited to be here. That's why my pulse is racing.
Yeah,
I do all the things, but I remain like flying is an extremely physically.
You weren't alive in the 70s, were you? It doesn't sound like, but looking back to if you're, for whatever reason, why, the popularity of the 70s disaster movie, and there were a whole lot of them, whether it be the airport movies or just, flying is so safe, but you had those movies, about shipwrecks or whatever. It was
well, there were plenty of those movies when I was growing up too, though. Though I didn't see them because my hippie parents have a TV.
And you see it on the news. Of course, flying is actually a very safe activity and very safe way to travel. But it's funny because I just wondered, what do you think about where America is going right now with its gender wars? I mean, it seems to be worse in America than it is anywhere else. Although I've heard Canada's worse. I've heard, some of the other English speaking countries might be worse, but.
What do you mean by gender war?
Well, in America, you have all these women who want to smash the patriarchy,
Is that real? Do they really? Is that just something they are constantly telling us on the media?
I think also because I live in Austin, I probably see the worst of it here. You hear stories of women getting women literally getting themselves permanently sterilized and things like that,
Right. So if I'm thinking about this like the director of the CIA or the FBI, like I'm imagining war. Okay. When war once upon a time involved men fighting, not women. Men were fighting. Women were the prize for the war, and women could be pretty disloyal. War, because it didn't matter. We survived. You go fight and die, and I'm the prize for the winner. So just be as strong as you can and you'll get me. And if your enemies are as strong, like, then I'll marry them. You know, I'm cool either way. And obviously I want you to win because you're whatever. But throughout the history of the human race, women were too valuable to send to war. Now, fascinating thing happened now that most war is not physical combat, it's drone combat, or, you know, it's combat like this. So now women are useful in war. Now women can fight because it's not in person. So now if you want your country to win the war, you want your highest, your smartest, your best and brightest, half of them are going to be women. Well, no, a majority of them are still going to be men just because of the way the parabola goes, probably. Yes. But you're going to have a good percentage, like 40% of your armed forces, 40% of your best and brightest. If you're thinking like a businessman and you don't care about the gender, you just want the best person for the job to win the war, because that's your goal, 40% of them are going to be women. And now, do women get to survive the wars now? Because we're not the prize anymore, right? So we're just going to get mowed down. Like now you're just going to obliterate the whole country rather than just the men. Because it used to be in war, you cut the heads off of all the men and then the women become the slaves of the tribe that won, but they stay alive. And so so you have this bet going on as the director of the FBI or the CIA. I'm betting that it's more likely that we will win the war if we employ women in the armed forces than if we have them at home making babies. And when I look at the situation in the United States, I understand how, you know, 50 years ago when they were pushing this idea of women being men, or women are the same as men and they should join the armed forces. I get that because women were having enough babies, but now women aren't having babies. And actually women birth rate has been plummeting since the 1800s. It actually started a lot earlier than we realize. And now I don't have a population to even get into the armed forces anymore. So I'm hiring mercenaries. And so if I'm the director of the FBI at this point, I'm like, this is a problem. I actually think that the strategy of getting women into the armed forces, it was a good strategy when they were having babies, but now I realize they're more valuable for my country if they go have babies. So if I were the elite right now, I would be changing the script and telling women to get home and have babies. But it seems to me that the elite in our country believe in the whole environmentalist overpopulation thing and keeping this whole men and women are the same. Let's get women in the armed forces. Oh, look, they're not having babies. How terrible. It seems like they want that. They want to decrease the population. So they're continuing to push it. But that does seem to be what's happening, is just a rapid depopulation of the West.
Well, it's almost this attitude, you know, that pregnancy and child rearing is a kind of slavery. You know, you're
oh God, I can't even.
We're
all enslaved.
You'll like this quote that Stefan Molyneux once said. He basically said, you know, a woman who has lots of sex when she's young will have lots of cats when she's old.
Oh, yeah, I could see that being true.
Yeah, you know, and you know. I've noticed also too, some of these women who do want to be rebel, and I said I want to be out and be my freedom, but by the time they get to their late 30s, it's like, Mom was right. you know, and
no, it's
because you're probably aware of the concept of baby fever.
Oh yeah, no, I think part of the problem is we're angry at Mother Nature. We're angry at biology. We're angry at life. Like, when you think about life, it's a pretty messed up deal. You know, you're supposed to just toil. Like, but if you read history, humans knew that and Buddha knew that life is suffering, life is toil. And you have these babies and then you toil for those babies and your husband toils for those babies and you toil for those babies. And that's how the human race continues. But the fact that life is toil and that sucks, that doesn't change. Whatever generation that we're in, whatever the toil is, whether it's toil behind a desk or toil in the fields, like life is still toil. That doesn't seem to change. And I think that humans, and especially women, have this false belief put into them by the media that's like, if I just find the right job, then life will not be toil. And that's a lie. And you know, it's very sad and hard.
It is kind of sad.
miserable, a lot of broken, miserable people. Like I can't tell you how bad the sex pressure on women from the girls that I've been talking to who tried to be the porn stars that the media told them they should be. It's not good for women. It doesn't make them.
Yeah.
It doesn't end well. And same with guys being, these little masturbators over in their rooms. That doesn't end well for them either.
Yeah, there's definitely something happening here.
Well, it's this sex worshiping culture. It's like sex has become the god, and that's what I've seen. The obsession with sex. It's like, at some point, aren't people like, I'm so bored with this? Like, at what point can you just be like, I'm so tired of seeing movie stars have sex in movies that have nothing to do with the plot, like gratuitous sex just everywhere, every advertisement, every book. I'm just like, at what point are you going to be like, actually, there are things in life that are interesting besides sex? Like the obsession with it, the turning it into God is really boring.
I wonder sometimes if kids will just get bored with it and say, I don't want this anymore. Because it's gotten to this point, where there's nothing special about nudity anymore.
No. And actors, every actor, it's just, you're supposed to be also a porn star. Like, it's just part of the job that you need to have a super explicit sex scene. It's just expected.
I should have asked, did you read 50 Shades?
No. I tried. I tried. I was so
tried.
I couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
Well, I was curious. I was curious, and I want to read whatever the public is obsessing over.
Yeah.
But I found it so I couldn't get there. Yeah.
I confess to reading the very first book. I never read a story with two more unlikable characters than those two. I mean, they were just awful. I couldn't root for either one of them. But I think 50 Shades had achieved this sweet spot of being naughty enough that it was exciting, but it didn't go too far that it scared people.
Oh, okay, there you go.
I mean, there is stuff out there that makes 50 Shades look like a Sunday school picnic.
Yeah.
But that scares people. But it got to this sweet spot. But yeah, I don't know what people are looking for in their relationships. I think Rollo Tomasi is right when he says that men are the real romantics.
Yes, I agree with that. 100%.
I really do want that, that the person who will be, with me for the rest of my life. And
they have this saying, I heard somewhere, that men love women and women love children. And that
there is some truth to that. I think the men,
they marry women. They fall in love with a woman and marry her
after the kids are there, and it's just like,
yep. It's so funny and sad and true.
And it's great when women, and it's great that women love their children. I mean, I will listen to any, and of course now that I'm older, but I will gladly sit and listen to any mom or grandma brag about the kids. I mean, if you want to brag about the kids, just go ahead and brag. I mean, I think that's great. One thing I won't tolerate at the same time, though, I don't want to hear you complain about your kids, because there was one time I was sitting at this political event with this guy, and he was saying, start saying, like, my son's a piece of shit. And after a while, I just wanted to say, well, maybe you're a piece of shit too.
Well, what you want to ask is, how did it happen? Because you don't want your son to be a piece of shit. So you've got to get that information. Like, if somebody told me their son was a piece of shit, I'd be like, oh, how did that happen? Tell me what you did wrong so that I don't make that mistake. I'd be all over that. Yeah.
There's something else too, though. I definitely think that the fact that we don't have big families has probably changed kids.
Yeah.
They're
a lot more selfish.
I've certainly met these women who, for example, grew up as onlys, and they become, they've always been the little princess, and they're still the little princess. Whereas if they come from a larger family, they have to compete for attention, and they're not, they kind of have to work for it,
Yep.
And there was a lady I know who's about my age. I think she has kids who are 12 and 11, and she was actually talking about moving into a new place, and the son and daughter actually now are going to get their own rooms. and they'd actually, which doesn't happen very often, you know, but a son and a daughter having to share a room. And she said, my little girl was crying.
Yeah, I don't think children should have their own rooms. I read a really interesting book. Yeah. So the Mormons, one thing I love about them when I was studying them is they put you in classes from your teenage years on good communication skills and marriage skills. So, and all through college, you are literally, every Mormon takes classes in how to succeed at marriage and family life. And one thing that they say is that children should never live alone, because living alone is practicing for being divorced. And I believe the same thing with having your own room. If the goal is for you to grow up and get married and share a room with someone, why on earth would you spend your childhood not sharing a room with someone? That's practicing for being divorced. That's practicing for liking being alone, which is not your future. And so if I want to raise a child who is going to succeed at family and marriage, I think they should share a room. So that's part of, that's
that, you know, well, you know, there's also, you know, the whole concept, you know, back in the 60s, most college freshmen had shared a bedroom. Whereas in the, now you have kids going to college sharing a dorm and they've never shared a room.
Okay, so at BYU, at the Mormon University,
yeah.
you go there and you live in houses of 6 to 8 people, and you cook together every night. They don't have a dining hall. You are expected to live in a family unit and learn how to negotiate chores and do chores together and cook together. You're literally practicing to be successful at family, which is the opposite of what every other kid in college is doing.
You know, I'm willing to bet also that BYU has a really good retention rate.
And a good, yeah. Well, and the Mormons have probably the best, the lowest divorce rate of all the religions.
But I mean of kids starting at BYU and finishing it.
Oh, and finishing? I think so. I think they're supposed to be a pretty good university.
Because if you go there and you have an instant family, you've got, and it's probably, you know, I know, for example, at Miami University in Ohio, when you start out as a freshman, you're paired up with a senior, and it's like your big brother or big sister, so to speak.
That's nice.
And Miami also has a very good, you know, record of keeping their students. You know, they don't end up quitting because they have. It really is interesting how those relationships work. That's amazing how that works. I didn't realize that, you know, with where you're cooking together and you're learning to live together and work together. You know, it's like everybody kind of has a small frat house or a small sorority.
Right. Yeah. Now, if I had a boy and a girl, though, I'm not sure I would. I don't know. I don't think I'd have them share a room past the age of 10 or 11. So you know, but.
Yeah, I think you always have those moments where you do want to go just be with yourself. But, you know, it was interesting hearing, you know, she was talking about how her and I think the girl was actually 1 year older, but she was crying when her younger brother went and got his own room. And you know, one thing I said to her, you know, best friends for life. Yeah. And that's what's going to happen, though. But you know, it's because I definitely think you benefit also from having opposite sex siblings if you don't have.
Yeah. You know, oh yeah, you learn a lot from them.
Yeah. So anything else you want to? Is there anything else you want to tell me about Nicaragua, or how are you looking to pursue citizenship, or do you have residency, or how's that work?
No, we just leave every 90 days, or we get an extension. Right now, we might get residency. My cousin actually, he did that. He has residency, but right now with his residency, what it means is that every 6 months he has to go to the city and I don't know, renew his residency. So I'm just like, what was the point in getting residency then? Like, I'll just leave the country every 90 days. There's always a good reason to travel somewhere. So
yeah. Well, you might, you know, there's always, you never know. I mean, they can still revoke it at any time. And that's one thing. I mean, once, you know, residency, I think is harder to, but obviously every country has different laws, you know, but you know, if you really, and of course, if you vote, you know, become a citizen, then you get to vote, but, you know, also might end up with, you know, the tax structure and things like that. It's
oh, no, I wouldn't do that. I would be a resident, but I wouldn't, I don't think I'd give up my American citizenship yet.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what, well, yeah, I
would be a dual citizen. Yeah. I don't know.
I often say anybody who has easy access to a second citizenship should go get one, just so you have one. If you have a parent or have a grandparent, and which is one way to do it, you know, hopefully, but if you don't, then because I think there's a lot of benefits to having a second citizenship that you won't get otherwise.
No, it's true.
It's just that, just the concept of not having your eggs in one basket. How is other things like? I mean, is it easy to find banks? Is it easy to get work on your car? Are there good cars? I mean,
here in Nicaragua,
I can imagine the roads probably aren't that great, but what's the infrastructure like?
Well, so the road where we live was built only about 12 years ago. Before that, it was a dirt road, so it's pretty new pavement. I'm not going to say it's pretty decently maintained. I think it's on par with Los Angeles. And Los Angeles has plenty of potholes too.
Yeah.
The infrastructure here, I mean, we have electricity, we have fiber internet.
Yeah, we have a good connection right now, obviously.
Yeah. I'm talking to you guys from a farm in the middle of the jungle. So
yes.
This is great internet. I would say I find Nicaragua to be a wonderful place to live. If what you value is your time. If you want to hang out and have a lot of fun, then I think Los Angeles probably has more fun going on. But if what you want is to live on a farm in peace and quiet and just do your work, then I can't imagine a better place to do it. Because in Nicaragua, the price point for staff is so low that you can have a cook and a maid and a driver and help with the kids, and you can have we employ several full-time farmers so that we can eat farm fresh food. My husband and I live on a farm, but we are not farmers. My husband likes to farm for fun, for his exercise. He's like, I'm going to the gym. I'm like, oh, have fun. And he goes out and gets his farm exercise. But we want to, unfortunately, for better or worse, we were trained to be white collar workers, which is what we are. And I want to homeschool my kids, hang out with my kids, and write my books. That's, I love that here in Nicaragua, I can have a cook and a maid so that I can really focus on homeschooling my kids and writing my books. I couldn't do that anywhere else in the world, as far as I know. Well, maybe another place as inexpensive as Nicaragua, but we calculated it once to the staff that we have here in Nicaragua. What would it cost in LA to have that staff? And it would cost, it would cost $500,000 a year to have the level of staff that we have here in Nicaragua for like $30,000 a year to have that in Los Angeles. It was so much astronomically more that it's just why the quality of life here for raising kids, as long as staff doesn't hurt children. And that's what I'm waiting. I'm always trying to monitor, I love having a cook and a maid because I want to homeschool my kids and write books. And I want to homeschool my kids really well and at a really deep intellectual level. And I can't do that if I'm cooking and cleaning. So I find having staff to be the most valuable thing in the world. Yeah. But I'm still waiting to see can you raise good kids with, staff? And so that'll be the question.
What's the experience been like? Obviously you told me your 11-year-old's also becoming fluent in Spanish as well. So what's it like adjusting? Because obviously you're becoming bilingual, right? Or trying to, or.
I don't notice my Spanish improving at all. I feel like I still speak terrible high school Spanish. My 11-year-old is fluent. My 3-year-old is pretty. They tell me he speaks really good Spanish. And my baby understands Spanish too. But my 11-year-old speaks way better Spanish than I do. And his comprehension, they talk and I catch a couple words and I figure out what they're saying. And then my 11-year-old tells me what they said, and it's very helppful.
Yeah. Well, they say you're not really, sometimes they say when you have dreams in Spanish, it's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, I could get a Spanish workbook and improve. I could, but it's funny. Like, that's not what I'm here for. I'm not here to hang out with a bunch of people.
Oh yeah.
So,
but if you're signing contracts or things like that too, or just trying to go out to a restaurant. I mean, I
have good enough Spanish for that.
I mean, when I travel, I mean, there are a lot of things I like about Central Europe. But I look at a lot of countries in Europe and I think these languages aren't going to be around 100 years from now. I mean,
that's so scary.
I mean, languages like Estonian or Romanian, but Spanish is still going to be around.
Yeah.
Because you know, if I move to Nicaragua, I've got a language that I know that is spoken other places besides Nicaragua.
Yeah.
You know, it's not.
And all over the United States.
Yeah, all over the United States, all over, you know, South America. It's a, you know.
That's one thing I've learned with my 11-year-old in the United States, in Los Angeles. He will speak Spanish to people there who look like they speak Spanish, and when they hear him, they know immediately that he's native, not like he didn't learn this in school. And they're always like, oh, and he becomes part of this secret club. I've gotten so much free parking because he made conversation with the parking attendant, and they're like, you're a member of my secret club, and they just give us free parking.
Yes, free parking in Los Angeles.
If you live in Los Angeles, that's the dream.
Yes. Oh. So what? Your son is saving you. He's probably saving you $10 an hour at least. I mean, just
well, he's super outgoing and friendly too. So
you also, you know, have you tried New York yet? That's
I have not.
You know, take him to New York as well, you know, and take him to Miami. You know, it's like yes.
It's fun.
You know, also he could possibly, if they do have a film scene or a movie scene in Nicaragua.
You think that, but oh my God, yeah.
Now, you have to have a richer country to have a film scene or movie scene. From what I hear, actually, a lot of the Spanish-speaking movies are actually made in Miami, but I don't know. There's got to be something in Mexico City though too. I mean, Mexico City is too big not to have
telenovelas,
but you usually got to have a pretty big city and a pretty big country to have that. So, you know, I don't know. It's a Nicaragua. I mean, do they consume? You know, that's curious. Do they watch a lot of American movies, or do they watch Spanish-speaking movies made, say, in Mexico or something like that?
I would say they watch both. They're huge into watching sports too, football on TV. I'm sorry, soccer. And baseball there, but I would say the main thing that people watch here is TikTok and Facebook, like, you know, the little shorts. Like, no one watches movies anymore. They watch little clips.
Yeah. You know, I've always wondered, why did baseball take off so much in the Spanish speaking Americas?
I don't think it did.
It's big in Cuba. It's pretty big in Mexico. It's huge in Cuba.
Yeah, that's why it's huge
they play in Venezuela and Colombia, but
because the socialist countries all chose baseball.
Well, Cuba had baseball before Castro. Cuba was into baseball big time. I mean,
maybe it's because maintaining a soccer field is a lot harder than maintaining a baseball field. I don't know.
I don't know.
But baseball is really big here.
You know, baseball is maybe because, one thing. It's always interesting. It always says something about a culture, though, what kind of games people play. And I often find I respect soccer. I think the thing about soccer is that all you need is a ball and an empty grass field.
Mm-hmm. But
there is a little more maintenance involved with a baseball, just because you have to.
Here in Nicaragua, the kids use rocks and sticks to play baseball. And they don't have balls. They're too poor to have balls. So rocks and sticks. If they wanted to play soccer, what are they kicking a rock? Like, they're not.
Okay. Oh wow, that's really wild. Yeah, that's interesting. Baseball with a rock. Yeah, because I know there's certainly been some Nicaragua. You know, also, you know, it was recent. You know, December 31st was the 50th anniversary of the death of Roberto Clemente. And he was a Puerto Rican baseball player, but he was actually died in a plane crash, and he was going to take supplies to Nicaragua after an earthquake. Did they do anything in Nicaragua to honor him?
I'm afraid I do not pay any attention to the media here. Okay. I don't pay attention to American media either. I never know what's going on. I live on a farm. I can tell you all about my chickens and my kids. I have a baby pig right now that thinks it's a dog, and it's really funny. But I can't say I remember somebody famous died. Steve Martin. No, not Steve Martin. That dude, Robin Williams. I didn't find out about that until like six months after he died.
Oh, wow. So what kind of books and stuff are you writing now? Or what, you have a blog and you're writing books? And
I have a blog, but I have a terribly neglected blog. I'm not a blogger.
Okay, yeah.
I don't make money on my blog. It has no advertisements. And it is now private due to a troll that I acquired, which was found out eventually. I'm not a fan.
Yeah. Substack is a good place where you can fix that.
Substack?
Yes.
But then don't you have to charge people?
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't want to charge people for my blog. I thought about this a lot because then I'm beholden to them and I need to take my blog more seriously. And I don't want to be a blogger. I like writing.
Okay.
So,
okay.
I love keeping books as my only income source. So that motivates me to work on my books rather than blog posts, which are a lot more a quick fix, right? It takes a year or two to write a book, whereas a blog post, I can do it this week, a really good one. And so so you're always going to end up doing the blog post because it's more fun and it's more right now. But what I want is to write these books and leave them behind for my children and my grandchildren. What I do is, so my first book was a theory of objectivist parenting. And what I came away, so I get a lot of emails from people who read this book, and what is lacking in the parenting literature is not more philosophy, but concrete examples. People need concrete examples of what it looks like to relate to children, to raise children, whatever. So what I have done is I've been writing down little stories of Anders's life since he was little. And they were just for us, and I would read them to Anders and he would love them. So what I did is I wrote a book called City Family, Farm Family about our life, about Anders's life when he was 2 years old. So the first book I wrote takes place in the year 2014. Anders is 2 years old, and it's just, welcome, here's this family with this mom and this dad and this 2-year-old, and they travel back and forth between Los Angeles and Nicaragua, and here are concrete stories from their lives. And it's similar to the Little House on the Prairie books in the way that they're just true stories from real life that take place in a very specific time in a very specific place. But it's not like Little House in that each of my stories. So when I first wrote it, it was much more like Little House. But then my readers, the first people who read the draft, they were like, no, you need to hold our hand a little bit more and hit us over the head with the message, because it sounds like you're trying to teach me something here, and I need it to be more clear. And so I would go through in each chapter and I would say the reasoning, like, here are the parenting decisions that I'm making, and the reason I'm talking to my kid in this way, the reason I'm making this choice, and here's why. And this is the thinking behind what I'm doing. So each chapter, some chapters are there just for fun, but each chapter is like a philosophical idea made concrete in a story that you can read to your kids. So it is to me what was lacking from the parenting market is just concrete examples of just how I'm raising my kids. I'm not telling you how to raise your kids. I'm telling you, when I had a 2-year-old and he threw a fit, this is what I did. Here's a concrete story about it. I had a 2-year-old who wanted candy in the store. This is what I did,
Objectivism is often too abstract, and you need more concretes like that. I think that definitely helps out. There's a lot of self-help in general is that way, unfortunately.
I hate that about self-help. I want every self-help book to be rewritten as, I had a problem. This is what I did to solve it. Here's my story. I don't want to know what you think I should do. I just want to know what you did. And then I will make my conclusions about what would work for me.
A lot of people are grifting in the self-help community, but so I definitely find it interesting what you've said about objectivism. It's certainly it's been good. I think it's been great talking to you. I don't know. Is there anything else you want to say before we go?
No, this is very fun. If anyone is listening to this and want to join or want to read my blog, email me. Tell me about yourself. And then
I want to read your blog too. I don't think I've read your blog, so
Well, I have some really incredible posts on there. There will be books one day.
You're also really making me want to visit Nicaragua. I mean,
you should. Everyone. Oh my God!
You pointed out too. You pointed out too. It's not that far away. I mean, it's 3 hours to Houston, maybe 4 hours to LA, right? I mean,
it is a 2.5 hour flight to Florida, a 3 hour flight to Texas, and I could be exaggerating.
But it's not a long flight.
It's not that far. It's so inexpensive. We had a guy. Okay, so we're on Airbnb, and we had a guy come stay here for New Year's Eve, and his comment to us before he left is, "This is the nicest hotel I've stayed at in Nicaragua. Like, this is the nicest." And I built this place as my home, and I have it's beautiful. It's paradise.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Airbnbs. You got an Airbnb? That's cool too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that I should look that up too, because I have to admit I've had really good experiences with Airbnbs as well. But yeah, but the other thing too about a place like Nicaragua, they don't have to take the big jumbo jets down there. No. I mean, and so you have a lot more flying options just because of that, because they have you can go say in a 737 or an A320, which is maybe 150 seats or 200 seats.
I don't know. I think right now, most of the flights were canceled during COVID. I think right now you can only take Avianca or United here.
There aren't that many airline options, but as opposed to going, when you have the 3 or 4 hour flight, you can take a smaller plane than say, when you have the 8 or 9 hour flight, which requires the big, the jumbo jets, got 2 aisles instead. I mean, the planes you probably go and have 1 aisle down the middle and then maybe have 3 seats on each side.
Yeah.
As opposed to the bigger jets that have 2 aisles and, usually, those are the jumbo jets, the bigger ones. Yeah. So when you're closer, I said, I want to go to El Salvador as well, because of what, I don't know if, El Salvador made Bitcoin their legal tender now. And
that's so cool.
I don't know.
But El Salvador is dangerous, or at least that's what the Nicaraguans say.
Oh, really? I've heard from people.
El Salvador and Honduras.
El Salvador actually tries to cultivate this image of being dangerous because they don't want to be taken over by expats. They don't. I mean, this is the thing. What keeps Nicaragua from becoming Costa Rica?
Oh, that's so interesting. I don't know. I went to Costa Rica for the first time a couple months ago. It is so expensive. I was like, I'm in LA right now. What just happened?
Yeah, I know.
You can get a good dinner here for $2. You go to Costa Rica, it's like 15. You're like, what? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and that's the thing, I always hear, I hear this a lot about places I go in Mexico. I said, where's this cheap Mexico that I heard about?
There's no cheap Mexico.
Yeah.
No, there's not even Nicaragua. If you're in the city, it's there's enough gringos there now that are brooding the prices for everyone.
Yeah. Well, it also depends on what kind of gringos they are. I mean, if you live in Austin, you seen California people ruin the prices for everyone. I mean, you got to remember, California. You lived in LA. They ruin everything.
It's the worst. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's so. I don't know what's going to happen with all this. I feel like we're reaching a critical mass here, though, and I feel like South America or Latin America might be the one safe place to be, because
we think about that all the time. We don't know.
Because Americans don't realize that, America is like this 90-year-old patient with Alzheimer's who's just had a heart attack and has maybe had a few strokes and having vital organs fail. And you eventually just think, what's going to put America out of its misery? Yeah. Well, it has been great talking to you, and be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. This has been a great talk.
This was really fun. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad to hear about Nicaragua and what else is going on there. So thank you very much, and I'll stop the recording now. Yep.